Did your college education turn you into a communist, or at least give you communist thoughts? It's a serious question. We're doing a series on that right now. We just did one on my general psychology book. Now, at a major university, I took a sociology class called The Emergence of Sociology, of Sociological Society. So, major university in the Northeast, I won't say the name, but it'd be easy to find out what it was because you could see where I went to school. And my minor was in sociology, got an A in this class, did well in it, but look at the subtle ways. I like to look at the subtle ways that they indoctrinate students, these major universities, into a socialist, Marxist, atheistic mentality, that thought process. First, it's important to note that one of the communist goals that was brought before Congress in 1963 is to infiltrate the school system. Infiltrate universities, infiltrate school papers, infiltrate psychologists, therapists, teachers. I'll put a link to that in the bottom, that there's many communist goals that were put before Congress. And we know Our Lady of Fatima said that if her requests, which are commands, if they're not heeded, Russia will continue to spread her errors. And Russia's errors are communism, materialism, liberalism, atheism, evolutionism, and so on and so forth. And that's exactly what we're seeing in these universities. It's still going on until we fulfill Our Lady's commands. Roman Catholic SOS. Pray the Rosary every day. Consecrate yourself to Mary. Wear the scapular. Offer up your sufferings. And Saturday's the first Saturday devotion. So here we are. Here's the next part of our series, The Emergence of Sociological Theory. It's not an intro class, but this is a 4-credit class. This is shaping the way we look at society, the way we're supposed to think. Page 1, Chapter 1. The Enlightenment and New Ways of Thinking. Interesting there. It starts with new ways of thinking. Were there ways, you'd ask the question, were there ways of thinking before? The answer, of course, we know is yes. We know Aristotle wrote the book on politics in 300 years BC, and we know St. Thomas Aquinas wrote a commentary on politics, and this is obviously the Catholic Church's social teachings. We know about all this, but we're going to start with the Enlightenment and new ways of thinking and totally discard the old. So I'll read you some excerpts from the book. Page 1. Sociology is, after all, only more systematic study of what people do in their daily lives and routines. It arose from the rebirth or Renaissance in Europe. Oh, so political thought, sociology started in the Renaissance period? When we have evidence to the contrary in Aristotle's Politics, it says, after centuries of apparent stagnation and misery, these dark ages were the aftermath of the collapse of the Roman Empire. What were the dark ages? What went on before the Enlightenment and before the Renaissance? This was the height of Christian civilization. The Middle Ages were the height of Christendom, and they're referred to in academia as the Dark Ages. Oh, these primitive people who couldn't think. This is the height of Christendom. This was where everything really took off. But no, for your college textbooks, it all began with the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, and these thinkers. So before that, there were the Dark Ages, where people didn't really know that much. Obviously, no. Just read any of St. Thomas Aquinas' writings. Just pick up any of his books, any of his works, and read any page, and you tell me how dark they were. Okay, and again, remember, the Catholic Church endorses Thomism and Scholasticism as the lens from which to view the Catholic faith and the world. But no, we're going to move beyond that. We're going to go right to Renaissance and the Enlightenment. Recapturing much that had been lost from the Greeks and the Romans. Okay, good. They want to talk about the Greeks, the ancient Greeks. And more significantly, recreating systematic scientific thought about the universe. Recreating systematic scientific thought about the universe. So what was the current thought about the universe? Catholicism, Scholasticism, Thomism, based on, of course, the teachings of Christ, teachings of the Catholic Church, the supernatural reason and the natural reason of Aristotle's Politics, as well as all of Aristotle's work, which St. Thomas Aquinas gave nothing but the highest approbation of. He calls St. Thomas Aquinas called Aristotle the philosopher. We're on page 2. The Enlightenment. Sociology emerged as a discipline early in the 19th century. Oh, really? The 19th century? That's when people started thinking about society. That's demonstrably false. But it was not so much a dramatic breakthrough in human reasoning as an extension of what is often termed the Enlightenment, the intellectual revolution, because it turned thinking about human condition towards the view of progress that was not only possible, but also inevitable. If you learn about the Enlightenment and this intellectual revolution, you know this was a massive break from Catholicism. So it talks about recreating the systematic scientific thought about the universe. The thought of the universe was Catholicism, and they want to recreate it. You see why on page 2, we're talking all about the new. We're speaking nothing about the old. And remember, Aristotle was not some flash in the pan. If we're talking about the Renaissance, here we are, the Renaissance, the Enlightenment, we're dealing with the 1600s. Aristotle was 300 years before Christ. So this is about 1,800 years of thought and understanding of the world that's being brushed aside. And we're starting with the Enlightenment. I missed also at the top of the page, before the Enlightenment, it says Sir Francis Bacon was the first to articulate clearly the new mode of inquiry. Again, a new mode of inquiry. What was the old mode of inquiry? The old mode of inquiry was Aristotle. Francis Bacon's work, don't be confused by the fact that Sir Francis Bacon was a Catholic, at least a nominal Catholic. His teachings, many of his teachings were anti-Catholic. His work, Novum Organum, means the new organon. Organon means method, the new mode, the new method of thinking. That's the scientific method. Sounds great. That's a departure. That's a rupture from Aristotle. And the way Aristotle's, so you say the Novum Organum, the new organon. What was the old organon? The old organon was Aristotle. And in St. Thomas Aquinas' writings, he gives nothing but the highest endorsement of Aristotle's organon. So Sir Francis Bacon is breaking from that with a new mode of inquiry. Conceptualizations of nature of the universe should always be viewed with skepticism. So we're going to start a science based on skepticism. Aristotle did the exact opposite. He started science and scientific inquiry and philosophy with what we already know. What can already be determined? First principles. That's a solid footing. So you have the old organon, the organon with Aristotle, endorsed by St. Thomas Aquinas in the Catholic Church, starting with what we know. And now you have the Novum Organum, the scientific method, Sir Francis Bacon, based entirely on skepticism. Which foundation do you think is a safer foundation to build your house, to build a building, to build a structure on something we know or something we don't know? Use your reasoning here. You be the judge of that. So the Enlightenment is where it all began. They're telling you. They want you to believe that. In France, the Enlightenment is often termed the Age of Reason, implying that before the Enlightenment, they were not reasonable. Again, pick up any of Aristotle's works, any of St. Thomas Aquinas' works, the Church Fathers, the doctors of the Church, and you'll see that's demonstrably false. We're on page 2. That's how they're teeing you up to understand society. The Age of Reason, and it was dominated by a group of scholars known as the philosophes. Sociology was born from the intellectual ferment generated from the French philosophies. Okay? Then we skip on. The philosophy's view of human beings and society was greatly influenced by the social conditions around them. Okay, so they were influenced by their social conditions. They weren't influenced as much by objective reality, the metaphysics, ontology, what is. They're influenced by the social conditions around them. That sounds like a bias to me. They were vehemently opposed to the old regime. What was the old regime? The Catholic faith, scholasticism, Thomism. So you see, they're building in a lot of assumptions here. They're saying a lot without saying it. The basic thesis of the philosophes, whether Voltaire, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, Condorcet, Denis Diderot, or others, was that humans had certain natural rights which were violated by institutional arrangements. Institutional arrangements. They're talking about the Catholic Church. I get it. Not all the popes, not all the kings were great people. Some of them did things that were evil. Yes. But as far as the social order, the hierarchy, the authority structure that was determined by God, that is a good thing. Bad people don't invalidate a good framework. We have to know that. That's pretty straightforward. So again, all these philosophers, none of them, they don't mention any of the Catholics at the time that were doing work that were talking about this. Okay, we move on. We're on page 5. The political economy of the Enlightenment. As I go down the page, from these combined revolutions, sociology emerged. Oh, so sociology arose from revolutions. The revolution of 1789 marked a dramatic transformation in French society. Yeah, away from God and the king. The revolution and the century of political turmoil that followed provided early French sociologists with their basic intellectual problem: how to use the laws of social organization and to create a new social order. You see everything from the very beginning of this book, a new social order, a new theory, new. What that implies is a departure from the old social order. Aristotle, Aquinas, scholasticism, Thomism, and the authority structure of the Catholic Church. This is what they're teaching kids in college. They're saying a lot without saying it, but these assumptions are built in, and this is what a kid comes to think. Chapter 2, we're on page 7. Auguste Comte and the emergence of sociological theory. Comte is called the founder of sociology. Okay, so we're going to want to know, let's see about our founder, right? Because we're starting a new theory right here. So let's see. Intellectual origins of Comte's thought. What did he think? Comte's sociology emerged from the economic, political, and social conditions of post-revolutionary France. So from this area, he's going to build an entire sociology out of it. Now, I'm not saying all subsequent sociologists thought just like him. I'm saying this is your foundation. Remember with psychology. With psychology, we said the foundation in the 20th century was built, or the 19th, 20th century was built on characters like Wilhelm Wundt and Sigmund Freud. Built on these people and the experiences that they had, as opposed to metaphysical, anthropological, ontological reality of philosophy and divine revelation, which is what the Catholic Church was teaching. Okay, so his theory emerged from post-revolutionary France. Not a good start. Let's see, what do we have here? We'll flip the page. Moving along. Comte believed that sociology could be modeled after the natural sciences. The natural sciences. So what's been going on around this time? Darwin, origin of the species, naturalism, materialism, a shoving aside of the supernatural, and not that we're putting down the sciences are great, but as far as atheistic Marxists' ideas, like evolution, that's incompatible with the Catholic faith. A naturalism, a scientism where everything is natural, the only thing that we can know are things that we observe, that's not Catholic, and it doesn't even make logical sense. So we have, so what was he doing? He wanted to create, so we're saying Comte here wanted to create something modeled after, he wanted to model this after the sciences, right? That's what he's saying. We're going to model this, we're going to model sociology after the natural sciences. So, what do we see? He's creating a science. Comte believed sociology could be modeled after natural science. Sociology could seek and discover fundamental properties and relations of the social universe. And like other sciences, it could express these in a small number of abstract principles. So now not only are we modeling this new school of thought after natural sciences, but we could also, we're using this to discover the fundamental properties and relations of the social universe. That's a religion right there. He's talking about developing a new religion. If you listen to that sentence, we want new principles for the social universe. He's talking about a new religion. He's trying to do something very large, very a big deal here. Okay, so let's keep going on. What do you see in chapter 3? Science as a belief system. So we're only on page 34, and we're talking about science as a belief system. Before examining the theories of Herbert Spencer, Karl Marx, Max Weber, Emil Durkheim, George Simmel, Vilfredo Pareto and George Herbert Mead, as well as many figures who influenced their thought, we should pause to assess the relation of science to sociological theory. So what we have here is these are the theories that they're going to study in the book. Nothing by the saints. The saints, the councils of the church, they dealt with social issues. They're not going to talk about that because they're not interested in the old way of doing things, the dark age. They want something totally new and something strange that they're coming up with on their own. So science as a belief system, we're actually seeing, that's the header right there. Science as a belief system. So they're replacing religion with these new ideas. It's dangerous. I mean, you're seeing it. It's all right there. And this is exactly the kind of stuff that the kids are getting when they go to a university, a major university. They're basing this on new ways of thinking, an elevation of science, a downplaying of philosophy, and a complete sweeping aside of the Catholic Church. Now, they didn't necessarily put down the church directly, but there is one section where they talk about the church just a little bit. Let me see if I could find that here. I was just flipping through this and I saw it. Maybe I didn't tab off that page. They didn't put down the church directly, but it's certainly implied. Here it is. I didn't tab off the page. So I'll go back to page 18. They're talking about Adam Smith. And the topic the topic here is liberal and conservative trends in Comte's thought. So it says liberal elements in Comte's thought. In England, Adam Smith had the most decisive effect on social thought. So, talking about the economic system and the wealth of nations that he wrote. So he had the most decisive effect on social thought. Adam Smith, not the Catholic Church, not the teachings of Aristotle, St. Thomas Aquinas. It's going back to Adam Smith. So let's hear. It says now the bottom ones. So again, not a very safe place to start. We start. Adam Smith was 1723 to 1790. He's the most decisive effect on social thought. Not the church, not the doctors of the church, not the theologians, not Aquinas, not Aristotle, but Adam Smith. Shaky foundation. Traditional elements in Comte's thought. Next section. Writing from outside of France. Catholic scholars such as de Maistre and de Bonald argued that the Revolution of France had destroyed the structural and moral fiber of society. Religious authority had not been replaced by an alternative. The order achieved from the old social hierarchies had not been reestablished, and the cohesiveness provided by local communities and groups had been allowed to disintegrate. Both Saint-Simon and Comte, as well as an entire generation of French thinkers, agreed with the traditionalist diagnosis of the problem. So they agree that the revolution destroyed the structure and moral fiber of society. But they disagreed with the proposed solution. Obviously, the traditionalists believed the solution was the reinstatement of religion, hierarchy, and the traditional local groupings. And now that's obviously at odds with what these other characters, these new liberal characters, want. They don't want to. Clearly, we see from all the pages that preceded this and that succeed this, that they weren't interested at all in going back to the old way of doing things, the Dark Ages. They wanted to create something new here. It says Comte became an atheist. So remember, the father of sociology, he became an atheist, born Catholic, became an atheist. And remember, it says sociology emerged from his experience. He saw that a return to the old order was not possible. Rather, it was necessary to create the functional equivalent of religious authority and to reestablish non-ascriptive hierarchies. So here he is. And again, this is just thrown into the book. Listen, I'm going to read this again. It's an important thing, an important concept right there. He saw that the return to the old order was not possible. That's the social reign of Christ the King. It was necessary to create a functional equivalent of religious authority. What's that saying? He's saying he knows that authority is important, but he wants to create a new type of authority. It's all something new. It's a break from Catholicism. He said, but he did believe a hierarchy needed to be put in place. So it says he gave traditionalists he gave traditionalist concerns a liberal slant. So what are they doing here? They're painting him as kind of a good guy here, where yeah, he has a liberal slant, but he still has traditional values. All you need is one drop of poison in your coffee to die. I mean, that's basically it. All you need is a little bit of poison. So the liberal slant, which we're seeing, it's a lot more than a liberal slant. He's talking about a whole new social order in the universe, a new hierarchical structure, a totally different way of viewing politics, sociological thought. So again, that's only 35 pages into the book. Then it goes on and talks about the other theorists. Really not that important because it's a lot of garbage. You're going to fill your head with nonsense. It's not saying that, oh, look at this. I just go to one page. I just flip open to page 56. It says Spencer's First Principles. Remember, the initial statement in this rather encompassing philosophical scheme was First Principles, published in 1862. In this book, Spencer delineated the cardinal or first principles of the universe. Drawing from the biology and physics of his time, he felt he perceived at the most abstract level certain common principles that apply to all realms of the universe. So he's coming up with new first principles in 1862. I wasn't even planning on going through that part. This is the kind of garbage you find when you flip through this. I just flipped through to another page, and I just saw a whole chapter dedicated to Karl Marx, which obviously we know what kind of train wreck that is. So first principles, you go back to Aristotle. You go back to St. Thomas Aquinas. This has already been dealt with over 2,000 years before this was written. So, again, it's overthrowing the Catholic Church, scholasticism, and Thomism, which is the lens from which multiple popes have said is the lens at which we have to look at reality from. So, this is what people would see if they go into a university. What do you do? Where do you go if you really want to learn sociology? If you were going to truly take it from the top, you'd be smart to start right here. This is the Commentaries of St. Thomas Aquinas, so you can see it. Commentaries of St. Thomas Aquinas on Aristotle's Politics. This lays out the foundation of sociology and political thought. Now, of course, Aristotle had teachers. He had people he was influenced by also. But St. Thomas Aquinas, when he speaks about natural reason, he goes back to Aristotle. The most comprehensive, the most logical and rational. So he starts there. These characters will have you start in the Enlightenment 1,800 years later. About 300 BC, and then Aquinas commentaries in the 1200s. They're going to take social theory from the 1500s. So what do you think? If you want to learn more about sociology, another great place to go, The Popes Against Modern Errors. It talks about, and the subtitle is 16 Papal Documents, Hard-Hitting Condemnations of Many of Today's Most Noxious Errors. Talks about liberalism, condemning liberalism, talks about socialism, condemning socialism, talks about just all the common, a lot of the errors they talk about in this book that are first principles here. This will shut all that down from the popes, the full weight of the church right there. And then another great book to look at, The Framework of the Christian State. Big book. You could just use it as a reference if you want, or you could actually go through it. Framework of the Christian State by Father Edward Cahill. This is the kind of stuff. These kind of books are going to have your brain latch on to reality. And instead of theories that are emerging from the society of that time, we're actually basing things on first principles. Talking about Aristotle, endorsed by Aquinas, the authority of the Catholic Church, which is protected by the Holy Spirit, and again, great Christian writers who've consolidated a lot of this information. So this is what happens. This is what happens in college. You have to be aware of it. It's not saying that every single thing in this book is bad, but it's ultimately it's divorced from ultimate reality, and it doesn't come together. There's not a cohesive unity of thought. Whereas if you read Catholicism, you're going to see a cohesive unity of thought, not just a nugget of information here, a nugget of information there. This is true. That's true. How does it tie all together? How does it completely tie together? How does this all make sense? How does this work together as a cohesive whole? That's why you need the Catholic faith. That's the lens from which to view reality. So What do you do? That's the natural level. We need to know that. At the supernatural level, you look at the supernatural level. Our Lady of Fatima said it. Russia is going to continue spreading her errors. Communism being one of them. Communism, atheism, liberalism, scientism, evolutionism. It's all there. So Russia's going to continue spreading her errors. We know in the early 1960s, they put before Congress the communist goals: infiltrate the universities, infiltrate student newspapers, infiltrate the news. It's all there. Look it up. We'll put a link in the show notes. And that's exactly what happened at a major university when I'm learning about the emergence of sociological thought. A lot of things are said explicitly, and a lot of things are said implicitly that get the student's mind to unhook from reality and to move away from the traditional Catholic faith. Make sure you stay with us. We're going to go through more of my textbooks. God bless you. God bless your family. Fatima Solution, Roman Catholic SOS. Rosary every day. Consecrate yourself to Mary. Scapular, wear the brown scapular. Offer up your sufferings. And Saturdays, the first Saturday devotion. When we get the triumph, when enough Catholics do that, we'll have the triumph of the Immaculate Heart of Mary, and she'll change all of this. You want to see society transformed? The only way it's going to happen is through supernatural means of Our Lady. She promised it at Fatima. So it was said, so it was written, so it shall be done. God bless you and your family. Take care.